reduced to a light breeze, not wind. So this kind of day, this is a farmer's day. We like this. It's beautiful. What a nice day. So I'm grateful for that. We'll start that way in gratitude. Today's lecture, uh, let's start with perennials. Perennials, I think, are probably in the gardening world the best investment you can make if you love beautiful things. Remember that how lucky we are to have plant material that originated all over the world. So when growing perennials, remember that not everything that you're purchasing is native to this environment. Um, Remember when you're reading books, not everybody lives in Connecticut. And that's very important when reading their tips on when to transplant, when to move things out of doors, when to do gardening things. If it's someone from England or someone from a different zone, you really should know what where they're talking about. I find that's something that concerns me when I'm reading articles, reading books, is to know who's writing and where they're from, because their timeline, their zones, very different than ours. So be cautious that way before you invest money in a plant uh, to know what you're dealing with. All right, what grows in Virginia isn't necessarily going to grow here in Connecticut. All right, so we are a zone 5, and sometimes they say 6. We're a 5, and the reason I say call yourself a 5 is because 5 is colder than a 6, and 7 is even warmer, 8 is even warmer. Those folks up on the Canadian border, they're 4s and 3s depending on elevation. So know your zone. Here you're 5. When you're looking at perennials to purchase, you need anything that will grow well in a 5, a 4, a 3. Something that its zone is a 6 is very marginal for us. And the way that you can make a plant, I used to covet this particular rose and she was a 6. So, I really should have not considered her. But if you use what is referred to as a microclimate, this is an area that maybe is tucked in next to the concrete of your foundation, or it's in a little alcove where your house keeps it from the wind. Maybe you've laid out white rocks around the base of the plant to absorb more heat, more light. These are ways that you can change a zone a little bit and baby a marginal plant into producing for you. All right. Most perennials prefer we talked pH in the very beginning. Most perennials like about a 5, 5.5 pH. The pH is the acidity or alkalinity of a soil. In order for a plant to be able to draw nutrients and to grow healthy and well, they are very in need that the pH be pretty close. If you don't know your pH, take a look around. In Hartland, you've got pine trees, you've got mountain laurels, you've got moss. That indicates to you a very acidic soil, a 5 or less. If you bring home a prima donna that wants an alkaline soil, what you'll need to do is add a lot of lime, and lime will bring the pH to a higher level. Um, that's one way to deal with it. But remember, an element like lime is water soluble and will wash out, and so that treatment for your perennials needs to be on an ongoing thing. It's not a one and done. A good way to know uh, what your pH is, how your soil is. We talked about getting in touch with your um, extension service. Yukon has a great extension service. It's manned by master gardeners, people who are enthusiastic, people who know gardens. So that would be a good place to start with a soil sample. Or, I mean, you can go and get pH strips, or you can just take a look around and see what's growing. So that's what perennials need. Now, the next thing that's the most important for your perennials would be the amount of light that you can give them in a garden. We talked, Eastern light is very cold light, very early morning. So it takes more of that Eastern light to be full sun. All right. So when you are buying a perennial and it says full sun, think about where you're going to put the plant. In the morning, full sun would be, morning light would need about 7 hours of light shining on it from the east to be full sun. As the sun moves to the south, you can get away with 5 or 6 hours as full sun. And then when the sun is from the west, that's when it's most intense. That's when it's the hottest, the warmest. About 4 hours of direct west sun is considered full sun. So you can see the difference that placement makes, and the amount of time a plant is in the sunlight makes. You can alter that a little bit by limbing up trees to make sure that your garden receives more light. But there are a lot of plants that do really well in the shade. So, I mean, that could be a whole class, just shade gardening alone. Um, so be very cautious when purchasing to know where your plant's going to go, that you have the place for it, the right amount of sunlight. Okay. So we've covered pH, sunlight, good drainage for perennials. Um, the bottom of a hill is always going to be wetter than the top of a hill. You know, the water, gravity brings it down, it puddles there. You know, when you go outside, if your feet are dry, you're comfortable. But if your feet are wet and you're out of doors in the cold, you're miserable. It's the same for plants. So, an area where water puddles, this can be a difficult place for many perennials to live. So be careful that you see drainage. For example, people buying lavender and putting them near a downspout, a rain spout at the house is never going to live there. They need a dry condition. And the way you know that they need a dry condition is look at the color of the leaves. The leaves are silver to silver blue. This tells you that this is a heat-seeking, dry-loving type of plant. That would be, let's say, lavender is a good example. You know, that's silvery foliage. Annapolis is a silver foliage, furry leaf. How many of you know mullein? Okay, so when we're looking for mullein and we want to go out and harvest mullein, where do we look? We look on a bank, usually a south-facing bank on the side of the road. Mullein grows there like nobody's business because it's good drainage. It's warmer. So that is what. Anytime you see a silver plant, the artemisias. I'm trying to think silver foliage. Silver is wonderful in a garden, in a perennial garden, a garden that's going to be viewed at night. Silver is a very good foliage color to have because it it reflects the moonlight, the light of the evening, and it's more visible. So in a garden, let's say you've worked all day and you're sitting on the deck and you want to look at your garden and it's evening, when by the time you can get out there, silver foliage, light blue flowers, white flowers, those are what you would put in a moonlight garden. Those are the colors you would add into a garden that would be viewed more in the evening than during the day. So keep that in mind, right? Perennials come from all over the world. We know the peonies are from China. Um, so remember too that they're not all native here, and think about where they come from when you're placing them in your garden. All right. Most perennials, a perennial like a peony, will outlive all of us. You know, they live for 100 years. So when you place them, um, the secret to a peony is never to bury them too deep. Keep that rhizome up close to the top of the soil. Just a little bit of cover over it. Um, by burying it too deep, you'll set them back where they won't flower for many, many years. And normally on a plant like a peony, it will take 3 years to become fully adjusted and gifting. Um, so about patience of about 3 years. When you're designing your gardens, and we're going to talk about designing in another class, but when you're designing your gardens and purchasing plants, just as a general rule, what I find is most perennials, um, you can count on about 18 inches of space per plant, right? So don't pack them in there, because something like peony, you put them in too close, you'll have to dig them up and move them. You'll just set them back that many more years. So when you're designing your garden, about 18 inches on center will give you plenty. Some perennials are very long-lived, like a peony, but some perennials are very short-lived, um, and some of those I'll refer to as, well, some of those I'm trying to think of a good example. Yarrow. Yarrow, very beautiful, and this is something that you can start from seed and it will bloom very often in the first year. Um, but they are not long-lived. And when I say not long-lived, maybe 3 to 5 years at the most, which isn't for a perennial a long time. So we're growing our yarrow, and it's absolutely stunning, and we're proud as peacocks because it's looking pretty good. And the next year, it's totally gone. Looking pretty good and really full might be an indication to you to take a little bit off that plant and put it somewhere else. Okay? So and let's talk about how they grow. Many perennials and many perennials will start this way. Grow from the main plant, and then coming off of it are little plantlets. We'll refer to those as pups. Yeah? The little pups come up and they fill out the plant and it grows outward like that. You see your hostas and many plants like that. So that's how a plant grows and can be uh, divided up and moved to other locations. But very often, and we'll get back to dividing, very often what happens is when a plant then has put so much energy into pups, think a dianthus. If any of you are growing the dianthuses, they're in the carnation family. What happens here with that perennial is the middle dies out, and then the pups are further away, but the middle of the plant has rotted away or is gone. All right. So what you can do in this case, there's several ways to manage your perennials so that you don't lose your investment. So when they seem to be growing very, very well, it might be, and you think, well, this one came on early, it flowered early, I got a lot from it. I'm afraid it's going to leave the garden because it's spectacular. Let's take a cutting of that and put it elsewhere and get it started. That would be smart if you're a New Englander, if you're a Yankee, you know what I mean? Don't reinvest, just take a cutting, put it over there. So when the centers die out, that that is normal and it's not something that you've done. So you can take a shovel, a spade, a trach, and just cut that dead spot out and remove it. What that's going to do is keep pests from nesting in there, keeping cutworms and other insects that would invade your plants. It doesn't give them housing. So take that dead section out, just cut that out and remove it. What it does is it frees up root space, and the pups will then send their pups into that vacant space. All right. When you're dividing perennials, there are several ways to divide. Most people say, dig them up, chop them up, replant them. But I'm too lazy to do it. I find if you just cut off a piece from the end, let's say, excuse me, you've got hostas and they're thick. In order to get them out, you've got to hire somebody because they're big, right? They're heavy. You can beg somebody, you can pay somebody, you can flim flam them, get them to come, whatever it takes. But I find instead of digging the whole thing up and cutting it, what I do is I come in from the edge of a perennial and I take my shovel, and instead of digging the plant up, I invert my shovel and come in on the plant this way. And then I'm just cutting off the one little piece, cut it from the mother plant, and then come back in with the shovel to remove it. Okay, so we're not disturbing the mother plant. A pup or two or three or four can go. The main plant stays right where she is. We don't set her back. So a lot of people will say dig it up to split it up, but I think that sets you back. So be more clever. Flip your shovel over and get in there and take a little bit all around the edge and move it elsewhere. It's a good way for dividing. Best time to divide, I find, is in the autumn. What I do is, the tape that they use for caution, something like that, where you can write on it. Put around the stem of what you want to move or to save if you don't have labels. Um, just write what it is and the color and where you plan to move it to, because you will forget. So move in the fall. And I do most of my planting, like my heavy duty planting, I do in the fall, because what's going to happen is we know weather's coming. When it's cold, the plants slow down. When they lose their leaves, they sit there dormant. There's activity under the soil because it hasn't frozen yet, but there's a lot of rain and you don't have to haul buckets. When you invest heavy in June and July, the plant sales that everybody and their brother has in the fall, I mean in the summer, it's because they don't want to water them either. So you can plant in the early spring is a nice time to add to your garden, but for division and for, like, if you're putting in a huge garden, do it in the fall. It will cost you less in time and in watering and in loss for perennials. All right. Did you have a question? No? Okay. So when you are working in your perennials, the best way to divide is by cutting that way. Another way to do your perennials, and we can talk some fruits, some berries this way too. Very often, even plants like boxwood, anything you can reach a stem, but a stem that's more woody, not a soft succulent stem, but something with a that will become woody. Uh, let's say this forsythia, we know that's going to become woody. We can take a lower branch and bring it down to the earth and pin it, okay, or lay a rock on top of it, and that will start it rooting. That way, you don't have to water or take care of it at all. Once there's a good root mass there, what I normally do, and you can do this with lilacs as well. Um, Once there's a good root there, what I do is sever it from the mother plant, but I don't move it yet. I leave it there, it's been severed, and then I let it just start to uh, grow its root system. Then, when the weather is good and I don't have to do too much work, then dig it up and move it. All right. This will save you a lot of loss, and this will save you. Uh, I mean, you can really grow a lot of plants, currants, gooseberries. Uh, any of you growing any of those edibles? What's that? Yeah, the reason I mention those is A, they're they're edible, human edible, but they're also great food for birds. You know, if you bring the birds into your garden, they do most of the work. They don't need to be paid. They're not unionized. You know what I mean? There's no labor laws associated with bird labor. So you could get them to come to your garden if you planted more berrying fruit. We'll talk about that in another lecture. But currants are no longer illegal in Connecticut. They were for a while, the same as gooseberries. They were because they believed they harbored a disease that affected white pine trees. Okay, but that ban has long been lifted. So currants are wonderful for eating, for uh, drying like raisins. You know, if you think about, I don't know how many of you uh, like are into doing your own food, but I'm like so into it. So think currants, reds, blacks, and whites, pretty much the same growing habit. Um, they're lovely. Gooseberries. I grew up always having gooseberries. It's a very Eastern European type of plant. Um, these can be propagated again by that stem. Uh, I wouldn't call it layering, I would call cheating. Um, so a rock or a bobby pin or any kind of bent piece of metal just to hold it down till it roots. Um, Gooseberries are a wonderful, wonderful food, and there are a lot of different varieties. Um, so if you haven't not been introduced to them, I had been this was a wonderful day for me. I had gone to a castle in Ireland, and of course, everybody was shopping, but me, I went to the gardens of the castle to see what was happening. And they had taken gooseberries and braided them or weaved them so that they formed a gorgeous fence around the vegetable patch, which kept the chickens out. Because you know gooseberries have thorns. So if you were to use those for fencing, weaving them, that was quite wonderful. Yeah, it was at that castle was the first time I'd ever seen a monkey puzzle tree. I had heard about them, I'd never seen one. So when I saw it, I was just like over the moon excited. To this day, I still remember my first monkey puzzle tree. It was lovely. So back to perennials. I don't know if you would consider shrubberies perennials, vegetable as a perennial, but I think if you get into currants and gooseberries, those would be a really nice way for you to start to learn how to do that art of of regenerating more plants. That's the easiest way to do those. All right.
Do they grow on a, I've never seen them. Do they grow in a bush?
Yeah, gooseberry is a bush, but it's thorny. But they look like small grapes. They're green or they can be red and pink. They have a little snap to them when you bite into them. As a kid, we would dash by my grandmother. We'll be back. I'll be checking out the gooseberries first. Um, very, very delicious for pies, for jellies, for jams. Currants the same. They're a small berry, but an easy berry. Um, I've never, I mean, I always grown them and I've never had a disease issue with them. And the thing of it is they're low and small. The birds love them, which is a good thing to add to your yard because birds will, if you can get birds to stay in your yard, they're going to come and they're going to eat a lot of bugs and insects in your garden. They'll do so much work for you, but in return, you got to invite them to your place instead of your neighbor's house. It's better if they shop at your place.
So if they get taller than, say, this, as tall as this table, in West Hartland on Hogback there's like trees
Of what?
of currant.
Of currants? Yeah.
Should we cut them, should we trim them, or just let them?
What trimming does, very often when a plant gets tall, it's because it's looking for light.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and the
Those are around
internodes,
times.
yeah, so they're lacking some light, and the internodes between the stems get longer. That's how you can tell. If you were to cut the top, which which keeps things controllable and easier to pick. If you were to cut the top leader, then everything behind it will send out shoots and branch. So you'll end up with a thinner, a thicker bush instead of tall. So I'm really into pruning, um, because that's a really good way to take care of a garden. And we'll get into some pruning in a minute. I just don't even know where we are time wise. Go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Excuse me, you mentioned gooseberries have thorns. Will that deter bunnies and deer?
Well, nothing deters deer, and bunnies. Well, that's why I think the Irish did it that way, where they made it into a fence, because none of the little hopping critters are going through that. You know what I mean? So that's wonderful. I mean, I was excited when I saw that. It was, yeah, they didn't just leave them like this. They crisscrossed them and wove them a little. So I'm sure they wore heavy, heavy gloves to do it. But that's how I saw it used, and I was really excited. And that was, at a castle where they try to keep things real for the time period, etc. So that was one of their works to keep the beasts from consuming. Yeah.
Do the berries, they attract the
I think everything attracts bears. And I thought long and hard on this. I'm doing taking care of I do an estate, and I'm reworking an entire area to be more bird friendly because the family's not there to fill feeders, but they love the birds. So I'm doing more berries to to bring birds in. And I thought long and hard about bears. They're going to do what they're going to do. The life must go on. Um, I don't think that they're going to put you on the map that you have berries, but I have thought about it on my own property. I've put my raspberries elsewhere, further away, because if they come, they can play there. I don't want them here. I want them there. So think about that. But a lot of the berries are tiny. The birds are going to come and go and get what they want, and it's not like uh, those berry bushes are um, in rows like an orchard. You know what I mean? A homeowner's not going to have so many berries that the bears are all going to be picnicking there. Um, I think that they see more in the wild than they would see in your yard. So I wouldn't let the thought of a bear deter me. But of course, I mean, anytime there's food, there's going to be bears. Um,
We have multiple blueberry bushes.
Yeah,
Never had a bear on the blueberry bushes.
yep.
Never. Knock on wood.
You're just
Your
lucky.
house.
No, it was
I've had
like-
2 brand new ones ruined by bears.
Oh.
And they prune my blueberry bushes all the time.
Yep. So it depends on where you are, so I can't speak to that. Yeah.
We're gonna come visit your house. When they
Well,
come to my house, I'm gonna, what's your address?
this is why when I did this, when I did a garden design, I did not put blueberries into the design because I didn't want to deal with the bears. But the currants, they're low growing and they're going to be mixed with other things. It's not like they have a nose for everything. I think you get away with some currants without them finding them. I wouldn't. I'm not giving up. I mean, we'd be without food if we waited for the bears, right? All right. So we've covered perennials pretty much. Any questions about them? I mean, we can talk perennials all day, specifics. I just wanted to give you basically how you're dealing with perennials. So figure 3 to 5 years, most perennials last, but some like peonies last longer. So invest in those things you find beautiful, but make sure that you know where they come from, where they're grown and how they're grown.
Question about
Sure.
hydrangeas.
Yeah.
I have one that's in really sunny spot. It's beautiful, big and ginormous, but it never flowers.
Okay. So hydrangeas can be difficult. Remember hydrangea means water. So the hydrangeas like water. Water seekers. So when I plant in a place, I maybe look for where the rain downspout comes and I make sure they have plenty of water. Very often with hydrangeas, a problem is people prune them at the wrong time, and they're cutting off blossoms. Hydrangeas have evolved to the modern day hydrangea like endless beauty, where it just blooms all the time. That's not standard fare for most hydrangeas. They're one, and the flowers grow, and the season goes on, and the color changes. But some plants, as soon as there's new growth, a flower pops on. That's more of the newer varieties, the hybrids. So without knowing what you have, it's hard to say how to deal. But I'm going to go back to, I'll tell you two ways to get them to bloom. A lot of my teachers, the old timers, will say, let's say you have a hydrangea, or you've got a vine that's not blooming, and it's lush and it's gorgeous and it's really happy and it looks healthy, but it never blooms. A plant's purpose on the planet is to bloom. Everybody's purpose is to bloom. We should be blooming, right? Doing better than we did yesterday. If they go on like that, it means they're comfortable and they're happy. So all my old timer teachers would say, scare it. And by scaring it, what they mean is, shake your finger at it. What you do is you march out there with a shovel and you say, see this shovel? I'm about to cut your roots and you're going to think you're going to die. And they go, oh no, don't do it. You go, no, it's happening today. So you go out from your stalk, about 9 inches for every inch of diameter, about 9 inches. Take your shovel, put it down in the ground, and go all the way around. What you're doing is you're cutting off all the roots that have gone way out looking for nutrients, and they found it. The plant is lush, it's beautiful, but it's not performing like it should. So that's one way to scare it, by root pruning. what it does is it puts a fear of God into them. But this is good because it says, oh, I'm supposed to flower. I'm supposed to make seed. I think I'm going to die. I better do it now. And that's how it works. So that's one way. One way is to scare it. Now, if you're meek and fearful and you don't feel that you can do that without crying, the next way to do it is to look at a fertilizer package. Remember, we talked, the first number is for nitrogen. That's the green stuff, all the leaves. The nitrogen, good for lettuces and plants like that where you want to eat the leaves. Nitrogen, yeah? Then the next number, this one is a phosphate. This one is for flowers and fruit. Okay, and the last one is for roots and stem. All right. So when you're looking to fertilize your problem hydrangea, you can purchase what is called superphosphate. Comes in a bag. Yeah, put it under the bush, but don't put it down in the winter because that's water soluble. It'll be leached away. Now is the time. Like this is a week I'm going out to fertilize my perennials and now is the time because they're waking up.
Time to scare them too, when they're waking up.
Anytime's a good time to scare a plant. But yeah, you can scare them because they'll be unthawed down there. But remember, what is above is also below. So sometimes you've scared them, and maybe you like overdone it. It might need a prune as well. But I would start by scaring, and in your case, and I said that only because some people have vines that are an issue. The scaring works. For your hydrangea, what I would do is right now I would introduce a lot of superphosphate. Okay, superphosphate being will be water soluble. Now's a good time. Give it to them now, and then in a couple of months, give them another little bit, and that will just remind them what they're there for. It can be replaced. Don't be afraid to talk fresh to your plants.
Well, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and you
ginormous bush.
tell her you're absolutely beautiful, but you're basically worthless.
Yes.
And you've disappointed me, and I'm going to help you with that. Yeah. So a little superphosphate.
One flower.
Well, one is a good start.
That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but you should have stood by the flower and said, "Oh, this is what I do in the greenhouse." Oh, look, everybody! Do you see a flower? Isn't this pretty? Yeah, I pointed out to them.
Last year, my bush had too many flowers. They were so heavy, the branches fell over, and it never blossomed like that before.
Isn't that nice?
Yes.
Last year was a really good year for hydrangeas, and a lot of times perennials, a lot of plant material, you'll notice it even with blueberries, is they're biennial. They'll do really good one year and not so good the next year, and then really good then every other year. So some of them tend to be that way. And here again, a lot of plant material that you think is perennial could be a biennial. Your dianthus is sometimes biennial. Your campanula, the campanula medium is a biennial. And the best time to plant that would be in the early fall, let them overwinter, and then in the following spring or summer is when you'll get your flowers. So the best time to plant a biennial is in the fall. Okay, that way they have enough time to situate themselves and they'll bloom the following year without care. Yeah. I can't say because I don't know the variety. You know what I mean? With most plants, when you don't know what you have for variety, the best time to prune, like this forsythia, when it's done blooming, that'd be the best time to prune it. because the flowers come on new growth. The flowers come on new growth, and so if you prune it now, new growth comes by the end of the season, and then you'll have, many more flowers next year. But as far as hydrangeas, it's always sticky, and that's a hard one to learn and to teach if you don't know what you have. I'm suggesting for people when I teach, university and that kind of thing, I suggest that people start a small notebook for their garden, and instead of putting the tag that you get with your, I always think of those little marking tags, a little like gravestones. Um, just this is what would have been here had it lived. Uh, they're a disappointment because when you're raking out the garden, all those are coming out and you see what didn't survive. So I think it's better if you take a notebook and you take that card, put it in the notebook, take a leaf from the plant and press it right there in the notebook. And then a note. Have you designed your gardens on graph paper? If it's on a graph paper, then give that plant a number in the legend and the number on your map. And then I own a garden center and people will bring me plants and they'll go, what is this? I dug it out last week. I meant to bring it down sooner. It looks dead. It is dead. But can you tell me what it is? You could have just brought me a leaf and I'd have told you. It's a Veronica. But if you had that in your notebook, so that when you're weeding and you go, oh, to pull or not to pull, right? Isn't that the question gardeners face? Oh, what is this? Well, if you look at your map and you go, oh, well, it's here. And what does my notebook say? My notebook says, ooh, look, bingo, a match. Huh? You could save yourself a lot of money in plants you don't throw out. So start a little notebook.
There are two hydrangeas that I have in my yard, and one might be the same variety as you were talking about, the abundant. I think it's called Queen Anne or something. It's a nativar that I got from the Northwest Regional.
Plant swap, yeah.
Yeah. And it was extremely abundant.
This was an incredible year for hydrangeas, though. And I think it's because the spring was so wet that it just was so much water that they're going, hydro. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it was a good year for them.
I just cut off the dead flowers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would do, is cut off the dead flowers until you get to know the plant. Let's move to pruning so that I can cover that, because we're the best time to prune anything is after it's flowered. If you are the keeper of a plant that has not been pruned in a while, or it's large and abundant and you're not sure what to cut, but you know that it's not the way you want it looking, the best thing to do is to set up a 3-year plan. And we're talking a big plant that has been there and neglected. So the first year, it's going to take you 3 years to make a plant perfect, the way it should be. Each of those 3 years, you take only 1/3 of the plant. If you take more than that, you're not going to leave enough solar collectors above to feed what is below. All right? So we want to step it back slowly so we don't do a lot of damage. I mean, some things you can just mow them to the earth and they're going to come back. But I can't say that for everything. So we're going to talk about the correct way to do it. So the first thing you're going to look for is, the first year, maybe you want to shape it because that's bothering you. There's many ways to do it, but a quick shape so that you can see what's there. The next thing I would do is crawl underneath and pull out any of the old wood, anything that looks dead, broken, or anything where branches are crossing. all right? The crossing, the wind, they rub together. That takes off the bark. It rubs into the cambium layer. The cambium layer is right underneath the bark. And this is where all your water and your nutrients, this is where the growth takes place, is in that cambium layer. This is also where disease can enter. So we don't want that rubbing and crossing. So any of that crisscrossing, that goes. And then the last thing to go would be take a look at the branches. And what you want to do is you want to, depending on what you're growing, a fruit tree is different than an ornamental when you're looking that way. But what you want is to open the plant up to light and airflow. So anything that's crisscrossing, any branch that is leading towards the center of the plant, get that out of there and get the branches going outward and upward. So on a branch, you all know where the leaf nodes are, yeah? Cut above a node, just above a node, and that node that you leave will be the direction in which the plant grows, all right? So you're looking at a stem and it's got nodes all the way up. Some nodes face towards the inside of the plant. Some of the nodes grow to the outside of the plant. Prune just above a node that grows on the outside of the plant, and that is the way your bush will grow. All right. So you don't want to ever cut face on a node that's facing inward, because that's the way your branches are going to grow. We don't want that. We want to open it up to light and air, especially when we're trying to get fruit and flowers. Light and air will produce more. When you cut at an angle, and the reason that you do that is so that water and dew and moisture rolls off of it and rolls away from it. If you cut it flat and water sits there for days, it begins to rot, and it'll probably rot that node, and then the next node under that is facing inwards. Okay? So just be careful of the direction of your cut. All right? When pruning, make sure you clean your pruning scissors. Just use a rubbing alcohol, something like that. And I'm not saying be out there all day doing that and nothing else. But you can transfer, especially in weather like this, disease. Moisture is bad. My dad, my parents never allowed us in the garden when it was wet, ever. Because when a garden is wet and you walk on it, you compress the soil. Once you compress the soil, the air has gone out of it. If you ever see anybody who rototills their garden or harrows their garden when it's wet, that soil stays like concrete all summer. So there is a time to work the earth, and there's a time not to work the earth. When it's wet, don't do that. Also, in a garden, a flower garden, something like that, walking in there, even if you're wearing a raincoat or your jeans, you brush up against a plant, and then you have that mildew on you, and then you brush up against another plant. You just pass it around the garden. So when it's damp, don't go into the garden. Go look at your seed catalogs, buy something. It's a good time to make other plants, but don't work the garden when it's wet. And that's hard in the spring is when you want to get in there and get going, but never work a garden when it's wet. All right. I think that we have reached time, so, and I know, but I want to answer your questions. And the next time we meet, I will include pests, and that's ongoing. I mean, we're from Hartland. There's pests. Yeah. It went just like that. Is Marilyn, you have a question?
Can you do the shading method like with box ones?
Of pinning?
Yeah, pinning it.
Yeah,
down, so
yeah.
it really creates a hedge. They start to kind of grow in between each other.
Yes.
Okay.
So pin them down.
Yeah.
That's a good way. I mean, I like to cut and propagate. I love that. I live for it. I'm propagating everything. I've got things growing everywhere. But pinning down and getting them started, let them root really good, sever them from the mother, let them continue to root, and then dig them up and put them where you want them. And there's a lot of things like that, especially shrubberies. You can help them along if you, let's say, just like pull off the leaves um, um, before you lay it on the ground. Pull off the leaves where it's going to come in contact, because where the leaves attach to the stem, that's a chemical called auxin. That's where they gather, is near those leaf nodes. So if you pull that and open it up, lay it on the earth, then it goes, whew, yeah, giddy up. They don't have to work through a dead and dying leaf. So just and feel free to strip it back a little bit. Do a couple, pin it down, and then once you see roots and a little bit of you know tension when you pull on it, sever it from the mother and leave it a while longer, then move it. But yeah, you can really get some boxwoods growing. Any of the shrubs like that, anything like that. Give it a try. What have we got to lose, right? Have we answered questions?
As a general rule, you prune bushes after they flower. What is the exception to that? So for example, I know roses.
Well, with roses, grow on new growth. So when it's done flowering, cut that flower off, which will bring more growth. Um, the more you have branching, the more flowers you'll have. So cut them. What happens when you're dealing with plant material? Once it sets seed, it sends a hormone back to the plant that says, success is ours. We're done. You don't have to do anything else. We're done for the season because we've made babies and we're good. So you don't want that message going back home. Keep deadheading and they'll keep coming. Um, especially especially on roses. So and it doesn't mean you have to cut the whole stem. You can just cut the head off. When I'm growing things like a zinnia, yeah, I have them growing, and the first little flower comes, and we're so excited. And I go out there and I cut the flower off, which kills me. But it gets side branching, and now I've got tons more flowers than one single little zinnia. You know what I mean? If so, we die for that, right? That's what we're waiting for. Nah, be brave. Cut the head off, and then what happens is everything behind that will branch out. So instead of one zinnia, now you've got many, many. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same with like dahlias. I grow a lot of dahlias. If you cut the dahlia down, let's say you just let the dahlia go, you're going to have some flowers, but no control over it. But if you cut the plant down, and let's say you leave 2 or 3 pairs of leaves, what's going to happen is everywhere there's a pair of leaves, it's going to send out a branch. And then that branch will be longer and the flowers will be bigger because all of the energy is going into that. So you can control the number and the size of what you're growing by your pruning. Ooh, it's fun. Keep your notebook and keep notes, but you'll see you can really control what's going on in the garden by how you prune. And sometimes you're waiting desperately for one flower when if you cut it off, you get a whole lot more. Yeah. My pleasure.